Take a moment and look at what you're wearing right now. Maybe you spent a few minutes choosing it. Maybe you grabbed the first thing you saw. Either way, before stepping into the world today, you made a decision that almost every human being makes without thinking. You got dressed. It feels so normal that we rarely stop to ask a simple question. Why do humans wear clothes at all? At first, the answer seems obvious. Clothes keep us warm. They protect us from the environment. They help us survive. But the deeper scientists look into human history, the more surprising the story becomes. Because the earliest reason humans began covering their bodies may have had far less to do with temperature and far more to do with the evolution of the human mind itself. To understand why, we need to travel far back in time. Modern humans have existed for roughly 300,000 years. For most of that enormous stretch of history, our ancestors lived without the wardrobes, fabrics, and fashion we know today. In fact, evidence suggests that for tens of thousands of years, humans survived with little or no clothing at all. This creates an interesting puzzle. If clothes were absolutely necessary for survival, why did humans spend such a large portion of their existence without them? Many people assume cold weather forced humans to invent clothing. But there's a problem with that theory. Early humans evolved in Africa, where temperatures were generally warm. Yet evidence suggests some form of body covering appeared before large-scale migrations into extremely cold regions. So, if warmth wasn't the original trigger, what was? Another popular explanation is protection. Clothing can shield skin from scratches, insects, sunlight, and rough terrain. That certainly offers advantages. But researchers point out something curious. If protection was the main goal, humans would likely have focused first on areas that face the most physical stress: hands, feet, and lower legs. Yet many early forms of body covering appear to have emphasized different parts of the body altogether. That suggests something more complex was happening. Then scientists discovered an unexpected clue from one of humanity's oldest companions, lice. Certain species of lice live in human hair. Others survive only in clothing. By studying the genetic differences between these parasites, researchers estimated when clothing became common enough to create an entirely new environment for body lice. The result was astonishing. The evidence suggested that humans were regularly wearing some form of clothing far earlier than many physical artifacts indicate. But even this discovery answered only one question: when? The much bigger mystery remained unsolved. Why did humans start wearing clothes in the first place? And the answer may reveal one of the most important turning points in the history of human consciousness. Imagine holding an animal hide in your hands thousands of years ago. Before it becomes clothing, it's just a piece of material. It doesn't provide warmth until it's worn. It doesn't protect anyone until it's shaped and prepared. To turn that hide into something useful, a person must first imagine a future version of themselves wearing it. That may sound simple today, but it represents a remarkable mental ability. The human brain is unique in its capacity to project itself into the future. We constantly imagine situations that haven't happened yet. We prepare for tomorrow's weather, next week's meeting, or an event months away. This ability is so natural that we rarely notice it. But in evolutionary terms, it may have changed everything. Some researchers believe that clothing wasn't merely a practical invention. Instead, it may have been one of the earliest signs of advanced human thinking. Think about the steps involved. A person sees raw material. They imagine a future use for it. They spend time and energy transforming it into something beneficial. Then they carry that object with them until the moment it's needed. This process requires planning, memory, patience, and foresight. Most animals live primarily in the present. They react to immediate conditions around them. Humans, however, develop the ability to think beyond the current moment. We could prepare for situations before they arrived. In this sense, clothing may represent far more than fabric or animal skin. It may represent one of the earliest physical expressions of long-term planning. Archaeologists often study tools to understand how ancient humans thought. A sharpened stone reveals problem-solving. A spear suggests strategy. But clothing reveals something equally important: anticipation. Someone made it before they needed it. Someone invested effort today for a benefit tomorrow. That idea might seem ordinary now, but it reflects a profound cognitive leap. And once humans learned to think this way, the effects extended far beyond clothing. The same mental abilities required to create garments are closely connected to the abilities that allow us to build shelters, store food, cooperate in large groups, and eventually create civilizations. In other words, clothing may be part of a much larger story. A story about the emergence of the modern human mind. But there is another layer to this mystery. Because planning for the future explains how humans could create clothing, it doesn't fully explain why clothing became so important. After all, people don't just wear clothes for practical reasons. Throughout history, humans have decorated, modified, and personalized what they wear, often investing enormous amounts of time and resources into appearance.
Why?
Why would a species devote so much energy to something that could be accomplished with the simplest covering imaginable? The answer may lie in a psychological ability that transformed human society forever. An ability that allows us to imagine what other people are thinking. An ability that enables us to see ourselves through someone else's eyes. And once humans developed that skill, clothing became more than protection. It became communication. It became identity. It became a way of controlling how the world perceived us. That transformation would reshape human culture in ways our ancestors could never have imagined. Imagine walking into a room full of strangers. Before anyone speaks, before names are exchanged, before a single conversation begins, your brain is already making judgments. You notice posture, facial expressions, body language, and most importantly, appearance. This process happens almost instantly. Humans are constantly interpreting signals from one another, often without realizing it. And for thousands of years, clothing has been one of the most powerful signals we use. But where did this behavior come from? Many psychologists believe it is connected to a uniquely human ability known as social awareness, the capacity to understand that other people are observing and evaluating us. At some point in our evolutionary history, humans developed a deeper understanding of how they appeared in the minds of others. We became capable of imagining another person's perspective. This may not sound extraordinary, but it changed everything. For the first time, individuals could think beyond their own experiences and ask questions like, how do others see me? What impression am I making? Do I belong in this group? These questions are deeply woven into modern life, but they likely emerged gradually as human societies became more complex. As communities grew larger, survival depended on cooperation. People needed ways to identify allies, recognize group members, and communicate status quickly. Clothing became an ideal solution. A simple covering was no longer just a practical object. It became a social tool. Different materials, colors, decorations, and designs could instantly communicate information about a person. Who they were, where they came from, what role they played, which group they belonged to. Without saying a single word, clothing could tell a story. This shift marked a major turning point in human culture. For perhaps the first time, people were not only concerned with protecting their bodies, they were also concerned with presenting themselves. And once appearance became meaningful, creativity followed. Across the world, ancient societies began decorating the human body in countless ways. Some used shells and beads. Others used feathers, pigments, woven fibers, or intricate patterns. In many regions, body paint and tattoos served similar purposes. What's fascinating is that these practices appeared even in places where heavy clothing wasn't necessary for survival. That detail is important. If clothing existed only for warmth, we would expect it to disappear in comfortable climates. Yet throughout history, humans continued finding ways to adorn themselves regardless of temperature.
Why?
Because the human body had become more than a physical object. It had become a canvas for identity. Every decoration carried meaning. Every symbol communicated belonging. Every visible choice helped shape how others perceived the individual wearing it. In this way, clothing became one of humanity's earliest forms of nonverbal communication. Long before written language existed, people were already sending messages through appearance. And the more societies expanded, the more valuable those messages became. What began as a simple act of covering the body was slowly evolving into something much larger. A system of symbols. A language without words. a silent conversation happening every time two people looked at one another. And this ancient language is still influencing your decisions today, even if you don't realize it. Now think about the last time you felt uncomfortable because of what you were wearing. Maybe you arrived at an event and realized everyone else was dressed differently. Maybe you felt overdressed, underdressed, or simply out of place. That uneasy feeling can appear within seconds, even when nobody says anything. Why does it happen? Because clothing is connected to one of the most powerful systems in the human brain, social belonging. For most of human history, survival depended on being accepted by a group. A person isolated from their community faced enormous risks. Food was harder to find. Protection was weaker. Cooperation disappeared. As a result, the human brain evolved to pay close attention to social signals. And clothing became one of those signals. Over thousands of years, garments evolved into markers of identity. They helped people recognize members of their tribe, community, profession, or social class. In many societies, specific styles carried important meanings that everyone understood. A person's appearance could communicate age, status, occupation, achievements, or cultural background before a conversation even began. This made clothing incredibly efficient. Instead of explaining who you were every time you met someone, your appearance could provide instant clues. As societies became larger and more complex, this function grew even more important. Imagine living in a small village where everyone knows everyone else. Clothing matters, but personal relationships provide most of the information people need. Now imagine living in a growing city filled with strangers. Suddenly, appearance becomes much more valuable. People need faster ways to understand one another. Clothing helps solve that problem. It acts as a visual shortcut, allowing people to make quick assumptions about identity and group membership. This doesn't mean those assumptions are always accurate. In fact, they often aren't. But the tendency itself appears deeply rooted in human psychology. Our brains constantly search for patterns. We look for signals. We interpret symbols. And clothing provides an endless stream of information for the brain to process. That's why fashion has never truly been about fabric alone. At its core, fashion is a social language. Every era creates its own visual vocabulary. Styles change. Trends appear and disappear. Materials evolve. Yet the underlying purpose remains surprisingly consistent. People use appearance to communicate something about themselves. Sometimes they want to fit in. Sometimes they want to stand out. Sometimes they want to project confidence, authority, creativity, professionalism, or individuality. The specific message changes, but the behavior remains remarkably similar to what our ancestors may have been doing thousands of years ago. The tools are different. The psychology is not. When you choose a formal outfit for an important meeting, casual clothing for a relaxed gathering, or something distinctive to express your personality, you're participating in an ancient human tradition. A tradition built on awareness. Awareness of other people. Awareness of social expectations. Awareness of how you're perceived. And perhaps that's the most fascinating part of a story. Clothing isn't simply something humans wear. It's something humans use to navigate society itself. A bridge between the private self and the public world. A way of transforming thoughts, identity, and intention into something visible. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the deeper reason clothing continues to matter even in a modern world where survival no longer depends on it. Today, humanity possesses technology that our ancestors could never have imagined. We live in climate-controlled homes. We travel in heated cars and air-conditioned buildings. We have access to materials that are lighter, stronger, and more comfortable than anything available in the ancient world. In many situations, survival no longer depends on clothing the way it once did. Yet clothing remains one of the most important parts of everyday life.
Why?
Because the true significance of clothing was never limited to survival alone. Throughout history, the human relationship with clothing has evolved alongside the human mind itself. What may have begun as a practical innovation gradually became something much more meaningful, a tool for expression, communication, and identity. Every morning, millions of people stand in front of closets, mirrors, or drawers making choices that seem ordinary. But beneath those choices lies an ancient process. Without realizing it, people are asking questions such as, how do I want to present myself today? What impression do I want to create? How should I adapt to this situation? These questions are not about temperature or protection. They are about perception. They are about the relationship between the individual and society. In many ways, clothing functions like a personal statement. It allows people to express values, preferences, beliefs, creativity, and cultural identity without speaking a single word. A business suit communicates something different than athletic wear. A ceremonial robe communicates something different than everyday clothing. A uniform communicates something different than a fashion trend. The fabric matters far less than the message, and that message is constantly being interpreted by others. This is why clothing continues to influence confidence, first impressions, and social interactions. People respond not only to what someone wears, but also to what they believe that appearance represents. The fascinating part is that this process works in both directions. Clothing doesn't just affect how others see us. It can also affect how we see ourselves. Many studies have suggested that appearance can influence behavior, confidence, and mindset. The clothes people choose often become part of the role they are preparing to play in a particular situation. In this sense, clothing becomes more than decoration. It becomes a psychological tool, a way of aligning identity with action. And perhaps that's the deepest answer to the question we started with. Humans did not simply begin wearing clothes because they were cold. They wore them because they were becoming something new, a species capable of planning ahead, a species capable of understanding social perception, a species capable of shaping identity through symbols and meaning. Clothing became one of the earliest technologies of the human mind, not merely a shield for the body, but a bridge between thought and society. So tomorrow morning, when you choose what to wear, it may feel like a routine decision. But hidden beneath that simple moment is a story stretching back thousands of generations. A story of awareness. A story of identity. A story of human evolution itself. Because every outfit carries a small reminder of what makes our species unique. We don't just survive in the world. We think about how we appear within it. And perhaps that's why clothing has endured for so long. It's not simply something we put on. It's one of the oldest ways humans tell the world who they are.